Rosa, on the other hand, lived a life completely opposite of Adrienne's, simple, heavy, and held together mostly by resilience. She woke up each day carrying the weight of bills, long shifts, and the quiet determination to give her newborn son a better future than she ever had. Since she couldn't afford childcare, little Matteo had become her tiny companion during the exhausting evening hours at the mansion. She would tuck him safely into a small staff area, hoping he'd sleep long enough for her to finish polishing floors and dusting rooms without interruption. Despite her struggles, she moved through the mansion with gentle hands and an honest heart, treating every object with care. And even though Adrienne could not hear her soft greetings, she still offered them, out of habit and humanity. But behind that tired smile, Rosa knew she was always one unexpected moment away from everything falling apart. Survival often looks quiet, but it is never easy. Adrienne had lived his entire life surrounded by luxury so breathtaking that most people could only imagine it. His mansion stretched like a silent kingdom, filled with marble floors, towering chandeliers, and hallways that echoed with memories of a life that once felt full. But ever since the illness stole his hearing in his early 30s, that world had slowly turned into a quiet prison. Conversations faded into gestures, laughter became a distant memory, and every night he found himself seated alone at the head of an enormous dining table that once hosted elegant dinners and business celebrations. Now, the only thing that accompanied him was the heavy stillness settling across the room like a familiar shadow. Even with all the wealth and respect he carried, nothing could fill the expanding emptiness inside him. And deep down, Adrienne knew that silence had become both his shelter and his greatest enemy. Sometimes, even a life full of everything still feels like nothing. In the quiet evenings that followed, Adrienne often found himself pausing just to watch the simple scenes unfolding before him, Rosa humming softly as she rocked Matteo to sleep, the child's tiny fingers curled around her shirt, and the gentle rise and fall of their breathing filling the once hollow room with a kind of peace he had forgotten existed. He realized that what had changed wasn't just the silence around him, but the silence within him. The emptiness that once stretched endlessly through his days now felt softened by connection, by presence, by a sense of belonging he never knew he craved. It wasn't the faint return of sensations that moved him, nor the subtle vibrations he had begun to notice, it was the rediscovery of something far more human. Through their quiet companionship, Adrienne understood that he no longer dined alone, not because someone else sat at the table, but because his heart was no longer empty. Sometimes, the real miracle is simply feeling alive again. As the days turned into weeks, Adrienne found himself looking forward to Matteo's presence in a way he hadn't anticipated. The mansion, once a gallery of silent rooms, felt warmer whenever the toddler's small footsteps pattered through its halls. And with that warmth came an awareness Adrienne could no longer ignore. Rosa was doing everything she could to survive, yet life kept placing heavy demands on her shoulders. He noticed the fatigue hidden behind her polite smiles, the worry she tried to conceal whenever Matteo fussed, and the quiet strength she carried even in exhaustion. One afternoon, after watching Matteo fall asleep in her arms while she struggled to balance her work, Adrienne realized he didn't want them to remain temporary visitors in his life. He wanted to offer them stability, safety, and a chance to breathe. So he arranged a private cottage for them on the property, along with a better salary, hoping to lighten the weight she carried alone. Sometimes, kindness becomes the bridge we didn't know we needed. From that night onward, something subtle but undeniable began to shift in Adrienne's world. Matteo's visits, which started by accident, soon became a small ritual the mansion seemed to welcome. The child would toddle in with his bright lunchbox or a newfound fascination, clapping his hands or reaching for Adrienne with unfiltered joy. Though Adrienne couldn't hear the sounds Matteo made, he felt them, tiny vibrations in the air, small ripples of life brushing against the silence he had accepted as permanent. With each day, he found himself noticing things he had long forgotten, the movement of curtains, the tremble of footsteps against the floor, even the faint rhythm of his own breathing. These sensations, once meaningless, now felt like pieces of the world trying to reconnect with him. Matteo didn't just visit the mansion, he breathed warmth back into it, and into Adrienne, without ever realizing the magnitude of his presence. Healing often begins where we least expect it. One chilly evening, while Adrian sat alone with another untouched dinner, fate decided to slip quietly into the room on tiny, unsteady feet. Matteo, curious and full of the bright energy only a toddler can carry, wriggled his way out of the staff playpen and wandered down the glowing hallway. By the time Rosa realized he was gone, the child had already toddled into the grand dining room, his wide eyes fixed on the shimmering table and the silent man seated at its head. Adrian looked up, startled at first, then strangely drawn to the little boy's fearless presence. Before Rosa could scoop him away in a whirlwind of apologies, Matteo reached out with a tiny hand, his palm resting gently over Adrian's heart. That innocent touch, warm and without hesitation, cut through years of isolation like light through a closed door. And in that moment, something long asleep inside Adrian quietly awakened. Sometimes, a single touch can change everything.